Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call to order the regularly scheduled Beloit City Council meeting. Today is May 20th, Monday. It is now 7:02 p.m. at 100 State Street, Beloit, Wisconsin. Roll call.
Roll call shows 6 councilors are present. Councilor Vandy Bogart is absent.
Thank you. Second item is Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
3 special orders of the day and announcements. Item 3A.
Proclamation declaring May 19th to the 25th, 2013 as National Public Works Week.
Mr. Vice President.
Whereas the public services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, sewers, streets and highways, public buildings, parks, recreation, transit, engineering, and solid waste collection, and whereas the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depend on these facilities and services, and whereas FEMA now recognizes public works as a first responder, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, are vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works officials, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff our Public Works Department are materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform, and whereas the theme for this year, Because of Public Works, is a tribute to all public works employees who create the foundation of a stronger, more livable community. Now, therefore, the Council President of the Beloit City Council does hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through May 25th, 2013 as National Public Works Week in the City of Beloit, and call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing public works-related services and to recognize the contributions which public works employees make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Presented this 20th day of May 2013.
On behalf of the Public Works staff, myself, I thank the councilors for their expressions of support and also of the community and their support of our general mission to serve the community as we do. This year, we've celebrated Public Works Week. Instead of a Public Works open house, we've participated with the pre-sale at the farmers market. So for each of the last 3 Saturdays, we've had informational brochures and staff providing information concerning the various divisions of Parks and Recreation and Transit and Operations, Engineering, and also then this upcoming Saturday, the last of the series, our wastewater facilities will be the highlight of our informational program this Saturday morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 3B.
Proclamation declaring May 19th to the 25th, 2013 as Emergency Medical Services Week.
Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services system consists of emergency physicians, emergency nurses, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, firefighters, educators, administrators, and others, and whereas emergency medical services teams and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills, and whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the City Council of the City of Beloit that the week of May 19th to 25th, 2013 be Emergency Medical Services Week, with the theme EMS, One Mission, One Team. The City Council further encourages the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Presented this 20th day of May 2013.
Thank you very much for this proclamation and recognizing our emergency responders for Emergency Medical Services Week. The City of Beloit is blessed with 39 years of service as the paramedic program in this region, and the first city of its size in the United States to have a paramedic program. Next year, when we celebrate our 40th anniversary, we'd like everyone to participate in that celebration and recognition of the accomplishments of that 40 years of service. I have two medics with me today from 13? 10. Ambulance 10 today. What I wanted to highlight for you is a new piece of equipment that we have placed in service. It is the, want to bring it up here, guys? Sure. The Lucas machine. The Lucas machine is a CPR machine that we're placing in service on all cardiac arrest calls. And it greatly improves the CPR, proficiency of the CPR that's available in the field. And what the studies are finding is that perfect CPR is creating survivability in all of our patients. And it's not necessarily managing the airway that we were all trained when we were kids going through CPR in high school. Right now it's compression-only CPR, and it's making a huge difference. This machine is $22,000 for this machine, and we're looking to make sure that these are available throughout the whole county. One machine is available through MD1, which is a medical physician vehicle out of Mercy Hospital, our medical direction, and they make that available to other communities. This is the one available in ours. It's in our command vehicle, and we make it available on every cardiac arrest. So just another piece of the equipment and the training and experience that's available in our emergency responders, of which 27 paramedics, the remainder are EMTs, and then most of those EMTs, we're also former paramedics, including myself. So hundreds of years of experience on the streets and making a difference in the quality of life of our citizens. And thank you for your support, and thank you for this equipment, and thank you for the employees that make such a difference in our community. Okay. Jake Fehrenbach, Jeff Heim, two of our excellent paramedics. Thanks again. Want me to grab that for you guys? Go ahead, I'll just put that aside.
Let's take it in pieces.
Yeah.
All right. Item 3C.
Presentation of the Daily Reporter's Top Project of 2012 Award to the Beloit Apartments Redevelopment Project.
I think Councilor Spritzler is going to defer to me to talk a little bit about this award and what it means, and then he's going to make the presentation to Kathy. This is the culmination of an application process that was sponsored by the Daily Reporter. And they do this once each year and request applications for various construction projects around the state of Wisconsin. And these things are all over the gamut, from private construction projects, building projects, huge civil works projects, highway things. There's a lot of University of Wisconsin system. Pardon me, I've been fighting my voice all day. Projects, and the one in the public housing category, the Beloit Apartments project, was selected this year and received this statewide award. As you know, we're all very, very proud of that project. A lot of thought and a lot of energy went into designing and redesigning all of those public housing units. Some were replaced, as you know. Most were remodeled in their current location. And a lot of effort was done to make them energy efficient, make them cheap to operate going forward. We also redid all the facades on the buildings so that they would be an asset in the neighborhoods in which they're located. And of course, did a very, very thorough interior reconstruction job as a part of that process. So we've taken units that were, pardon me again, all 40 plus years old, put them back in really top flight serviceable condition, and hopefully they'll be able to serve our customers, our tenants, ably for the next 40 years. Kathy Pollard is the Executive Director of the Beloit Housing Authority. Kathy came in slightly after the project began, picked up and did a lot of the heavy lifting. This project, as you recall, was financed using the federal Section 42 low-income housing tax credits, along with some grant, some HUD capital grant funding, and some stimulus funding. This is not an easy project to administer, so I wanted to take this opportunity to publicly recognize the tremendous role that Kathy played in personally overseeing and administering this project. So with that, Mr. Vice President, if you'd like to present the plaque and read the inscription, turn the microphone over to you.
The plaque says Top Projects of 2012 for the Beloit Apartments redevelopment, presented by the Daily Reporter. Congratulations.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
And I'd just like to say, in graciously accepting this plaque, that there was quite a team that went into this project. We have the development team of Dimension Development. We have our largest financial contributor of National Equity Fund. We have our construction team of McGann Construction, and we also have the City of Beloit. And I would really like to thank this council for all of the support that you gave us along the way and all of the confidence that you put in the Housing Authority to actually make this accomplishment happen.
Item number 4 would be public hearings. We do not have one this evening. So item number 5 is citizens' participation. We've reached the point on the agenda for citizens to speak to the council about issues that are coming before us or may come before us in the future. Councilor members may not act on any requests at this meeting, may refer the speaker to staff for assistance. We ask that you hold any comments to 3 minutes or less and refrain from personal attacks of any kind. Do we have any individuals wishing to come forward and speak under citizens' participation? Second call for persons to come forward and speak under citizens' participation. Third and final call for persons to come forward and speak under citizens' participation. Hearing none, I'll close the citizens' participation portion of the agenda and move on to number 6, the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless the council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered at this point of the agenda.
Approval. Second.
Do we have any individuals wishing to pull something off? Okay, Councilor Spreitzer.
I'd like to remove 6E.
6E. Okay, and Councilor DeForest.
That was my request as well.
Okay. All right. So the consent agenda will consist of items 6A through 6D and 6F. And we have a motion by Lubke. Did we have a second?
Second.
Second by Levy. All in favor of the approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes 6-0. Item 6E, please.
Resolution authorizing the City of Beloit to apply for a COPS 213 hiring grant and increase the police department's authorized strength to 73 with notice of a successful application.
Chief Jacobs.
Yes, the request you have before you is for the authorization for us to apply for a grant that will allow us to raise our authorized strength by 1 and apply for a grant that's available through the COPS hiring program that will partially fund 75% of one position for 36 months up to $125,000 over a 4-year period. The grant provides the department the ability to do community-orienting policing strategies and help provide for added school security because there's a request by the school district in the 2014-15 school year to provide another school resource officer. And we feel that's appropriate and needed in the community. Our SRO program has been a valuable asset to both the schools and the police departments and the community. And this grant would help provide that service with minimal financial responsibility to the community.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Vice President.
A couple of questions I can give you at once, and you can answer them as you want. I'm wondering about the cost of this, and in terms of maintaining the positions for our share of the funding, and particularly that 4th year, how we're anticipating having the money to do that, and then in terms of the reimbursement that we're anticipating from the school district for the school resource officer, how much of that will offset the costs that we're paying as our local share here, and how much would be left from that, and then is there an obligation that we maintain the size of the force at 73 for this period of time, or if something else were to come up that would require changes there, would we just be obligated to maintain this person in this position?
Well, the last question first. We are obligated to maintain this position for 4 years. I don't anticipate that will be a problem because during that 4-year period we will have some retirements. We have to maintain our strength, that extra one person, but not necessarily the person. But that shouldn't be a problem with retirements. The financial obligation is the salary, wages, benefits of the officer each year, and the grant provides for a declining amount of money each year for the position, and it starts out at $32,000 to the final year where we have to pay the full amount of the position at $111,000. Now, as far as the two positions go, the grant and the school resource officer, they don't necessarily go completely together. This grant is for a new patrol officer, and it will pay partially for that new patrol officer. The school resource officer position, which is being requested, we usually don't put a brand new officer in those positions. Usually the officer has at least 5 years experience before they can go into the schools. Now the school pays 75% of the 180 days where the school resource officer has contact with the students. So between the two grants, we should do pretty well with the burden on the community, and the money for that will come out of our general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor DeForest.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble in understanding. You said we need to keep the same force number, the position number, but you're talking about when people retire, you weren't concerned. We still have to fill those retiring positions with people. So I guess I'm unclear of the rationale that you're...
The reason why I say that is because oftentimes when you add a new position, people are worried that that position, that person who's hired for that position may lose their job after 4 years. And that's not likely in this case at all because of retirements.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're saying that the number of officers on the street would remain the same, and you're not concerned that at the end of 4 years, if we decide to cut back that number, that there would be any layoffs at that time? Is that what you're saying?
If there were any cutbacks, it would have to be school resource officers from that position.
Okay. And so the 73, that doesn't change the configuration of our officers on the street?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilor Lukey. I just wanted to add that
having that extra officer allows us to have that officer in the buildings, and if we didn't have that officer and the buildings needed to call an officer, one from the streets would have to go. In my 20-some years working as a principal, working with these school resource officers, they've been a wonderful addition to our schools. And I think with the school district reimbursing 75, and I think at one time it was 80% of the cost of this, it would make a very small dent in our budget. But I just wanted to say what a great program this has been, Chief, and I hope we can continue it.
Well, I agree with you. Let me add, it's not only an asset to the schools, it's an asset to the police department, because these officers come back and they receive some specialized training with the students, but they also know a lot of these students over their years involvement with them, and that helps in their investigations throughout the rest of their career oftentimes.
The school district is the community, and the community is the school district, right?
Sure.
Councilor Spreitzer.
Just to follow up on some of the questions, I guess where I'm struggling a little bit is just with the commitment, the 4-year commitment of maintaining our force at a certain size, and in particular those last 2 years of funding, given that we don't know what the state budget picture is going to look like for the next 2 years with any certainty, much less for the 2 years after that. And do you know what flexibility, if any, there would be if we end up in a situation where that's not possible? Or I'm just trying to wrap my head around that kind of commitment for that time period.
I'm not aware that many grants are very flexible unless the inflexibility or issues are caused by the people that are giving the money in the grant, and then they can bend a little bit. But I can't predict that. Our conversations with the city manager about funding and the state budget, we feel that it's fairly stable at this point. But we certainly can't predict in 2 years what the formula will be for the municipalities.
Can I quickly add,
Yes.
Mr. President? Maybe
Yes,
I
go
can
right
clarify this. There's the variable here is that we are talking about adding one school resource officer, not just replacing one. So instead of 2, there would now be 3. So there will be a revenue source from the school district that offsets a good part of that salary. All right? That is new revenue that's coming into the city. So we're not looking 4 years out at funding 100% of an officer's position. We'll have about 3/4 of that position covered from the money from the school district. We are looking at covering a new officer now that will be coming in under the grant. We will have them available till August, I guess, or early September of 2014 that will be added to the cadre of patrol officers. Then beginning in September of 2014, one officer, not the same officer, but another officer will be committed essentially full-time to go into the schools and will provide service to 2 of the new intermediate schools that will be activated that year. Once that occurs, the number of officers on the street as a result of the COPS grant will be exactly the same as it is now. And that's the purpose of the grant, is to keep manning levels exactly the same in terms of service delivery to the community and be able to accommodate the school district's request for an additional officer, an additional school resource officer.
Could I ask a follow-up to that? I understand that that rationale, and I think certainly that's everyone's goal. What's in the back of my head is 2 years ago we obviously had to cut the size of the police force by 5 positions. If something were to happen state budget-wise 2 years from now where we were to be in some kind of circumstance like that again, my understanding is that this would tie our hands and say we couldn't do something like that. Obviously nobody would want to do something like that, but explain why you're comfortable tying our hands in that way.
Well, 2 things, I guess. Number 1 is we really need to continue to provide this level of service to the school district. If we don't go for the COPS grant, then the city has to pay that full salary for the first 3 years. By going for the COPS grant, we get most of it, a lot of it reimbursed through the grant program for the salary and benefit cost. As far as trying to predict what the state budget is going to do or not going to do, that's really difficult. I think the growth in revenue this year, combined with not only no regard for municipalities, we weren't even part of the dialogue, but yet where they're adding more mandates and putting more regulatory restrictions on local government is pretty indicative that we're not going to get any help or support out of the state government. But they also haven't cut us any further. So whether they will do something like that in 2 years is just impossible to predict. And we did have some issues like this 2 years ago, and we did have to work with the grant agencies on continuing funding for some of these grant positions. So you can't eliminate their position, but there are ways to do a workaround if things get that critical. The problem is we've already cut to the bone in all of these departments, and we really don't have any more space to cut without deeply impacting service delivery. We got the same problem in the fire department. We were fortunate to get the SAFER grant to restore that staffing, but that only runs for 2 years. And then after that, we've got to try to come up with more money for the fire department as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Levy.
I just need a point of clarification because I just want to make sure that I'm getting this, that with this application for this grant, we're mainly talking about one position. That's the one that we're talking about for the school district, correct? So, and I guess I want to just make sure that I'm clear because I know we're talking about that we want to remain at the 73 number. I just want to make sure we're not getting everything mixed up. And maybe I'm confused. That, yeah, we want to man the 73, but I think, in my understanding of this, is the grant is for 4 years commitment, but the person that we're talking about bringing aboard is going to be for the school resource officer position in 2014 or 2015, but we're kind of bringing them on right now because we're applying for this grant. So after the grant runs out and we're committed, my understanding, unless I'm wrong, that we're being committed to that position that we have for the school resource officer where they're paying the 75%.
It's not exactly that way. We are requesting a grant for one additional position so that our manning, our staffing levels on the street will remain unchanged after we create a third school resource officer position. But the two positions are not the same. There will be a more senior officer from among our trained and experienced cadre that will be selected to be the third school resource officer. So it's not the same person. Okay. Now, after the 3 years when the grant runs out, when the grant funding runs out, you still have a 1-year commitment to retain that extra position. And again, we don't see us eliminating that position because we are not adding any additional officers or response capacity on the street. We're going to be still at the same level that we've been at now for the past year and a half. All we're doing is adding one position through the grant to stay there because the school district will need a third school resource officer in the fall of 14. Because remember, they're going from 2 middle schools to 4 intermediate schools.
Right.
So to provide that same level of service to them, we need to dedicate a third officer.
So then to provide the same level of service from the police department, we need to maintain that 73 number.
Well, it's 72 now.
72.
And we want to maintain 72 active officers, I'll call it on the street.
Okay.
And that's everything from DAG to investigations to patrol officers to sworn command staff. But that's the goal here.
Okay, I got that. Now brings me to another point, and then I'm going to leave it alone. Because we're also looking at a similar type of grant for the fire department.
That's the SAFER grant.
That's the SAFER grant.
Correct.
And we had it in our budget workshop that when that grant runs out, we may be eliminating those positions. Are we looking at the fire department, at that SAFER grant, the same way we're looking at this grant? Because I guess I want to, in lack of a better word, I want to make sure it's consistency because...
No, the grants are different. The grants are different. And
I understand the school
requirements
district.
are different.
I understand
under
that.
the two grants. The SAFER grant does not have a continuation requirement when the grant terminates. If it had, we would not have been able to commit to that because of the expense of 5 positions over the expense of 1 position. And again, don't forget, in the police department, we're adding a third school resource officer, so there will be a reimbursement from the school district that will cover most of the expense for that position. And that's why we're not as concerned about the runout liability with the COPS grant as we would be with the SAFER grant.
I got it, but I just, it's a very, I understand there are two different type grants, but to me, it's a very thin line there that I'm just looking at and saying, this grant, we know at the end we're going to save this position because we're still going to need it at the end of the term of this grant. The SAFER grant is coming in, but we don't know if we're going to need those firefighters that's been on board through the SAFER grant. We're just going to say, well, we probably don't need them at the end of the grant. I get the whole thing, but I'm just trying to wrap it around in my brain how that's consistent and how that's fair. But I digress.
Different.
I know it's two different.
They're two completely different grant programs with different criteria and different requirements. So I think we haven't always kept grant positions in the police department either.
I
A
get
few
it.
years ago, we eliminated a position there when the grant ran out. So it depends on what the budget will tolerate and what our needs are at that specific point in time.
Let me just make one quick comment, and then I'm done with it. I agree with all of that, and I like the way you summed it up by saying if our budget will allow us to do it, but I just want to make sure, and I'm not saying that we're not going to do it, that we're going to be looking at all these positions the same way, even though they're different types of grants. In my mind, they're still kind of similar, so we need to make sure we're exhausting our options and looking at the budget for all these positions the same way.
Well,
Okay.
I'm not sure what you're advocating, Counselor. If you're advocating now that approving this COPS grant means that there's been some kind of commitment made that we are keeping all grant positions following the conclusion of the grant period, we've got an issue with that. So we've never done that in any of the departments of the city. I'm very nervous about making that kind of commitment going forward, because I don't know what the city's finances will allow us to do when those grant periods come to a close.
Well,
Sometimes we're able to renew the grants or get a new grant for a different amount. Sometimes we don't. We eliminate the position. Sometimes we're able to, to rotate the position into a permanent status. So there is no fixed answer. There is no one way that these things are done.
Right.
Okay.
And just to clear it up, I'm not advocating for anybody or anything. I'm just saying when we talk about grant positions and they run out, and I just make sure, maybe I heard it wrong, that I thought we said when this grant runs out after the 4 years or something, we're still going to need the man at that level that we're hiring in at, or whatever the case may be.
1 year.
For 1 year. All I'm saying is, let's look at all of it the same way. I'm not advocating for anybody. I'm not advocating for any one department other than the other. I'm just simply saying that when we look at funding positions, grant-funded positions, if we're looking at doing that, funding it after the grant runs out, let's just look at all positions the same way. That's all I'm saying. I'm not advocating anything. If we need to move people around, so be it, because then we're being consistent. That's all that I'm saying.
Okay.
Right.
Councilor DeForest.
Thank you. I have a somewhat related question about expectation for level of service from the school district. So I guess I wanted to ask, in your communications with the school district, if there's 4 intermediate schools, they're only looking for an additional 1, what's going to prevent them from coming to us again and saying, we really want another one for that 4th school? I mean, I guess I'm confused by the rationale for needing a 3rd versus 4. Have you had any communication with them about that? Because I'm also concerned about, at some point, if the grant, is not renewed, and we're looking at the school district looking at us saying, well, we have this expectation for level of service that might. I'm concerned about officers on the street as well as the proactive work that happens in the school. So I don't want to affect our numbers on the street. So that's part of my concern. Have you had communication with them about their expectations for level of service from us?
Well, in the meeting we had with the superintendent, they're satisfied with the services they're receiving now. They know that the school resource officers are a benefit to the school district, and that is why they came to us and asked for this other position. They recognize that you can't have one school resource officer for 4 intermediate schools. It would it'd be terrible. So they're willing to. They came forward and asked us with their expectations, and I'm fairly confident that they're going to continue. Certainly, they're in talks with the other people who work with the people in the school district, and they have issues with their budget, and they felt this important enough to have a school resource officer in another school resource officer for the intermediate schools. So you can ask the superintendent. He may be able to give you a better answer, but we wouldn't. I wouldn't come forward and put us through the process of hiring a new officer and training another SRO and without feeling that the district is on board and they're going to stay on board.
So to follow up, they are planning on sharing one of those positions between 2 of the intermediate
Yes.
schools? Okay.
Yes. I believe that they would like to have one in each. But,
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, Mr. President, this is the current level of service that we've had in the district for a couple of decades. There are 2 school resource officers now. One is full-time in the high school, and then there's one SRO that works about half-time in each of the middle schools. So by going from 2 middle schools to 4 intermediate schools, the district creates the need for 1 more SRO in order to maintain the same level of service. And we met directly with the superintendent. I'm sure they'd love to have an officer in each building. They know, full-time. They know that's not realistic. This system's been working well for the district. So there's no reason to believe that they would come back. And certainly if that were to happen, we'd need to come back to council and discuss that, because that would be a huge change in the manpower commitment for the schools during the year. In essence, then you'd be going from 3 to 5. So you're talking 2 more positions.
Right. Right.
That's
Thank you.
not in the plan at all.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Kincaid.
If I may digress, a tactical question. If an officer is needed in an uncovered school, do you deploy one from the one of the 3 or 4 that are on duty, or do they come from the other people?
Generally, if it's just for a short period of time, the school is uncovered, and the school resource officers can go between the different schools if there's an issue, if there's something that's planned. But anything that needs a rapid response, one of the officers from the street
Gets there first.
go there. As a matter of fact, the officer who works in the high school area spends a lot of time in the school helping out. So he's familiar with what goes on there and what's needed.
Thank you. It was good to hear that the officers have special training. It's more than being a hall monitor and less than a lot of other duties that they have, I'm sure.
We do try to send them to some of the conferences that are available each year to keep them up to date with all the things that happen, because as you know, the kids really make things change quickly in the schools, and you have to try and stay with them or ahead of them.
Thank you.
I don't know, I'll throw my 2 cents worth. Is if we're prepared to say no to this, I think that we need to say no to the school district. Because at the end of the day, I'm not comfortable reducing our people on the street any more than absolutely necessary. So if we say no to this, then we probably need to say no to the schools. 2, I would like to say that we'll have to live with the 1 year of run out with this grant. Obviously, that's undesirable, and I don't see that as tying us to any other, making us do run out on any other grant position that we'll ever encounter. So I think we've kind of digressed quite a bit and left topics pretty solidly here, which I'm not real happy with. Now, do we have any other questions or comments? All right. Did we have a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Moved by Lukey, second by DeForest. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 6-0. Item 7A.
Proposed ordinance amending the zoning district map of the city of Beloit to change the zoning district classification of the properties located at 1500 and 1505 Gateway Boulevard from R3, low-density multifamily residential district, to M1, limited manufacturing district.
Mrs. Christensen.
The Beloit Economic Development Corporation Executive Director Andrew Youngke feels that the best use of this property is for industrial. That is what he's been seeing in terms of RFPs and such, which is why he applied for the amendment to the comprehensive plan. On March 18th, you did adopt an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan, future land use map to recommend business park for those properties. He subsequently applied for rezoning to M1. A public hearing was held at Plan Commission and Council. No one came forward at either public hearing. After the last meeting, we did put up a sign on one of the properties because we only have one sign, I found out. But we put it on the one that was on the apartment side because that seemed to be the concern. We did not hear from any residents for or against based on that additional notice. So it's on your agenda tonight for action.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
Move approve.
Moved by Spreitzer, second by Kincaid. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the matter. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 6-0. Item 8, we have appointments. We actually have some today. Good. So, I, the undersigned Charles M. Haynes, duly elected President of the Beloit City Council and subject to confirmation by the Beloit City Council, does hereby appoint the following citizen members to vacancies and in terms indicated below. Said appointments being pursuant to nominations made and approved by the Appointment Review Committee at the regular meeting held May 13th, 2013. The appointments for the Board of Appeals, incumbent Merlin Bussan for a term ending May 31st of 2016. And incumbent Carolyn H. Hansen for a term ending May 31st, 2016. For the Plan Commission, incumbent Angela P. Moore for a term ending April 30th, 2016. We have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Moved by Levy.
Second.
Second by Spreitzer. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We've passed these 6-0. I'd like to please announce the following vacancies. The Alcohol Beverage Licensing Control Committee has 2 vacancies for residents. The Appointment Review Committee has 2 vacancies for residents. The Board of Appeals has 2 vacancies for alternate for residents and 1 vacancy for resident. The Board of Ethics has 1 vacancy for a former city councilor and 3 vacancies for residents. The Board of Review has 1 vacancy alternate for resident. Business Improvement District has 1 vacancy for owner-occupant. Community Development Authority has 1 vacancy for public housing resident. Equal Opportunity and Human Relations Commission has 2 vacancies for residents. Municipal Golf Committee has 1 vacancy for youth representative. The Municipal Library Board has 1 vacancy for resident. Parks and Recreation Conservation Advisory Commission has 1 vacancy for youth. Plan Commission has 1 vacancy for resident. And Traffic Review Committee has 1 vacancy for resident. These are all extremely valuable positions in our community. This is an important way to serve your community. I would advise that if you have any interest, please contact the City Clerk's office. Item 9, City Councilor activities and upcoming events. I will start with Councilor Lubke.
Excuse me. It's nice to see farmers market in full swing. It's just fun walking down there on Saturday and seeing all the people and all the good eats and treats and flowers and stuff. And it's just I look forward to that for the next 5 or 6 months. I was fortunate Friday night to attend with our city manager the annual dinner for the Beloit Historical Society. And then last week on May 10th, I represented the city at Hackett School for their groundbreaking. And as I was standing there, a student walked up to me after they released some balloons, and the student handed little piece of paper, and it says on the paper, "We will take care of our school." So I wanted to bring this back to the council and just share that. The kids were all very enthusiastic on that very hot day, but so I want to share this with the city and with fellow councilors. We will take care of our school. It's a good sign. Good kids. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor DeForest.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank all of our Public Works employees as we acknowledge their service during National Public Works Week, and then also all of our emergency responders as well as we celebrate Emergency Medical Services Week. And I am excited for our 40th celebration that we'll be having to recognize our paramedics in the city of Beloit. It is quite a progressive indication of the people that came before us, that they saw the need even for a city of our size, and so I'm grateful for that upcoming celebration this year. I did want to just say how touched I am by the flags along Riverside Park. I am grateful for the volunteers that placed them there and that donated the flags. It was really enjoyable to see the Beloit Memorial High School football team, the teenagers there, placing those signs on the windy, chilly Saturday morning with other volunteers. It was really encouraging to see the youth involved in placing those, and certainly want to honor our veterans in our community, and excited to wave to them along the street as they return back to our city, and we get to welcome them back home from their trip out to visit memorials out east. So thank you.
Councilor Levy.
Nothing.
Councilor Kincaid.
I have no comments yet this time. I'll reserve time.
All right. Councilor Spreitzer.
I had a wonderful time attending Art Walk, and I also had a chance to attend the Tri-State Alliance Summit on Regional Economic Development Cooperation, and it was great to hear from our friends in Dubuque, Iowa, and in Rockford, and also some of the other surrounding communities about the work that our communities are doing together.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to add is that I believe Wednesday is when we were going. When is it that the vets roll is supposed to be coming back? Is that Wednesday?
Yes, Wednesday evening, they'll be coming down Riverside Drive, probably 9:15 to 9:45, somewhere in that timeline.
Okay. I advise that everyone be available, or anybody who has an interest to be available to wave and welcome our vets back. It's a great thing, in spite of some of the things that have been said in the paper recently. I think it's a great thing to honor our fellow veterans. That's all I've got today. Okay. So item 10A.
Well, Mr. President, while we're getting set up for the PowerPoint, just quickly introduce Terry Downing, who's our Director of Community and Housing Services within the Department of Community Development. Terry's here again, as she does each year in May, to provide council and the community an update on the various code enforcement activities that are ongoing in the Community Development Department. Terry?
Thank you, Larry. As he said, I do this every year, so this is an updated version for 2013. I hope you're easy on me this year. The city has a code enforcement program with 3 components. There's an interior systematic rental inspection program, an interior multifamily residential inspections, and an exterior citywide code enforcement program. The pie chart here shows the breakdown of our over 6,500 rental units in the city.
The microphone. Get a little closer.
As you can see, about 2/3 of the rental units are single-family or duplex units, and the last third are multifamily units. The interior systematic rental inspection program has all buildings containing 1 or 2 rental properties are scheduled for inspection on a 3-year cycle. 4 full-time and 1 part-time inspection official complete these inspections each year. If a complaint is received, the inspection official may inspect rental property more often. As shown on the slide before, there are currently 2,562 single-family and 1,418 duplex rental units. 598 of these are Section 8 voucher holders, so we do have an inspector at the Housing Authority that does those. There's a multi-point inspection items that the inspectors look for when they go inside of a property. Working smoke and carbons are a big thing that they're looking for. They have to have those on each floor. Condition of stairs and presence of handrails. Sanitation, including presence of rodents, insects, and vermin. Condition of all interior surfaces, heating facilities in all habitable rooms, openable windows in all bedrooms, light switches in all habitable rooms, checking for dangerous electrical issues. Exits and entrances cannot be blocked. Stairwells must be well lit and not blocked. Door to the unit must be lockable with the key from the outside. The multifamily residential unit inspections look for all of those things that you saw on the last slide. In addition, they look for some fire safety issues because there are common areas in some of them, and there are extra state laws and things that govern those. So in all buildings containing 3 or more rental properties are scheduled for inspection on an annual basis by 1 full-time inspection official. Fully sprinklered and buildings that have their own individual entrances are inspected once per year. Unsprinklered and partially sprinklered buildings with common areas are inspected twice each year. Half of the apartments are inspected at each inspection. And in 2013, there are a total of 2,776 multifamily housing units. This inspection includes functioning exit emergency lights. Our inspector checks the fire extinguishers to make sure that they're updated and not expired. She checks the sprinkler heads and sprinkler maintenance reports. She checks for illegal extension cords, storage of flammable and combustible items. She makes sure that pull alarms are being tested once per month. She makes sure fire doors are functioning and apartments are numbered. Examples of interior code violations are unsanitary conditions. One thing that we've been seeing more of is hoarding, which is in the upper right-hand corner is a picture of what a hoarding situation looks like. Lack of basic facilities, that means they have to have running water, toilet access, heating facilities, and if they don't have those, the property's posted unfit. Examples of fire safety code issues are items on top of stoves, overloaded circuits, which is in the right-hand picture there, and other electrical hazards, which you can see in the bottom picture on the left. The city also has an exterior code enforcement program that is conducted citywide. Inspectors locate violations by driving their routes each day, so routine observation. We receive citizen complaints that they respond to, referrals from other city departments, and we also see violations when we do our systematic interior rental inspections. These are the beat areas of the inspectors. Each inspector has a different color, with the exception of the multifamily inspector. She doesn't have an outside area because of the volume of units that she has. So there are 5 inspectors on the street, and these are their different areas. Once an inspector identifies a code violation, they send a letter which outlines the violation at the time and a time frame to comply. All complaints and citations are entered into the Munis code module, and staff works with the property owners and upon request will approve reasonable extensions. If the code violation is not corrected, a citation may be issued, and the citation schedule is listed above or below. Examples of violations that need to be corrected immediately are motor vehicles parked or stored on the grass, unregistered or unlicensed motor vehicles parked outside of an enclosed building, vehicles over 1 ton parked in residential areas, major overhaul of motor vehicles. There was some misunderstanding about this last year. There was a lot of complaints and chatter. Major overhaul of a motor vehicle is not just simply changing your oil or working on your car. That's allowed. But you can't do major overhaul like replace the motor or change the transmission. And there's a time frame on that. If it's more than 4 days, that's when you'll get a violation letter. And then bulky appliances stored on the property. Other examples are to be corrected in 5 to 7 days are tall grass, weeds, and trash and debris. Within 30 days, interior repairs including electrical and plumbing, unless it's a safety issue. Screens and storms on windows, dead trees, unless it's a safety issue. Interior sanitation, unless it's to the point of being posted unfit for human habitation, and interior peeling paint. Things that need to be corrected in 60 days are exterior painting, large property maintenance projects, driveways, and roof repair or replacement. And major property maintenance issues and repairs should be corrected within 120 days. These are the numbers that were pulled for 2012. As you can see, there were almost 2,000 interior systematic inspections, which are for the rental properties. Almost 3,000 multifamily interior inspections, and over 5,000 exterior inspections. With those inspections, there resulted over 4,000 violations and approximately 480 citations for property maintenance. There was an additional 130 citations for renting without a rental permit. And if you need more information, you can ask me now, or you can contact me at 364-6650.
Counselor DeForest.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry, for the presentation. Can I ask, first of all, that we can get a copy of the presentation? And then also, is it possible that we could make it available to the public, maybe on our website under the departments? I don't know how feasible that would be to make it available to folks in public. That would be great. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask, well, first, I just wanted to commend commend you and your staff, because I know that you've been working really hard to meet with property owners and trying to find ways to make the whole system as user-friendly as possible to try to address concerns that have been raised. So I wanted to thank you for that. One thing I wanted to ask was, I know in the summit that we had in the past, we discussed the possibility of less frequent inspections, particularly for those units that don't have previous violations or for landlords that don't have history of chronic violations. Have we gotten any closer to rethinking that and having less frequent inspections for those cases?
We've had some internal discussion about maybe pushing out the inspection 1 year if there have been no violations for the last inspection.
Right.
The difficulty is in tracking that.
Okay.
So we've been trying to update our Munis system.
Okay.
Which is it's a complicated system on the inspection side. So we're trying to clean up some of the numbers so we can see exactly how we could pull those things, because it's not as easy as hitting a button and saying, oh, they didn't have a violation the last time.
Okay.
So we are updating that, and we're getting closer and closer to exploring changing that.
Okay, so primarily it's just a software issue right now that we don't have the ability to quickly put our hands on who hasn't had violations before.
Well,
and who hasn't.
I think the software issue is just the first step.
Okay.
The first step. So we can't even evaluate how many there are, because if, only a handful of landlords don't have violations, it wouldn't make sense to just create the system for a handful of landlords. So that's the first step for us to analyze the data to see if it's an option for us.
Okay. And then also, one thing that I know that you were working on when you took over in this position was meeting with your staff and having staff briefings to help develop consistency. I know last year you probably felt beat up on it, and I apologize. That was not the intention, but we've been hearing from residents and property owners about concerns about consistency among inspectors. I know that you've been working on meeting with the staff together collectively to address consistency, and I wanted to ask if you feel we've gotten a better handle on or done a better job of having consistency on that term, providing reasonable extensions, because that's pretty vague. To what's reasonable extension to one inspector might not be to another. So
Right.
Do you feel like you're closer to having some consistency there?
I think we're closer to having consistency.
Okay.
I meet with the inspectors once a month, and we have kind of an open discussion where inspectors can bring up how, a certain kind of violation that they know that they're not enforcing consistently. And in the staff meeting, we draw the line and we say, this is how we're enforcing it from now on. This is where the cutoff point is. So I do think that in a practical sense, we have, created some consistency. There are some problems with the code and the way it's read and the way it's interpreted. Some things are outdated, I think, and we have met with the landlords in the summit, but also we had another meeting with the landlords. I brought the landlord suggestions to our staff meeting, and most of the things that were brought up, the inspectors agreed with. So I have been working with I've had one meeting with the city attorney's office to talk about how we move forward in updating the ordinance.
That's
so that
exciting.
way it's in writing, and it's just clearer for people, for not only the public but for our inspectors to enforce.
Great. Thank you so much for your work on it.
Councilor Kincaid.
Yeah, thank you for your hard work. We know it's a tough job.
Thank you.
One thing I'm particularly interested in are properties in the city which are abandoned for whatever reason, foreclosed, bank-owned but vacant, absentee landlord-owned and maybe vacant, who knows. What do you do about those in terms of inspections, and what is the city doing to try to keep a handle on these in terms of deterioration of the neighborhood, let alone the house?
That's a good question, and all of those things you brought up, there's an issue with those things. We try to, where we can, we order, if it's a bank-owned property, we can order the bank to take care of the property if it's got broken windows or long grass or trash and debris, because what happens is people find out those places are vacant and they'll dump things like tires and other kinds of things, and they're trash and stuff. So we do order the banks, and in some cases we can even cite the banks. Now whether, sometimes that doesn't even get a response. And so what we do is we have a contractor with this that does work for the city, that goes out and either mows the lawn, shovels the walks, cleans up the mess, and then we special charge the property, so that way it's basically rolled into the taxes, so the city can recoup their costs that way.
Do you lien the properties when you have to go out and do the work?
Yes, that's what a special charge is. So it's placed against the property, so anybody who purchases the property has to pay that charge.
Are you the person who we call if we have one in the neighborhood that needs some special attention?
You could call me, or you could call Joan at the general number that was on there.
Flash your phone number up.
And we do have a unique problem where banks will foreclose on a property just so far and then kick the tenant out or kick the resident out, but then the house remains in the tenant's name or the resident's name, and the bank won't switch the deed over to their name. So then we're in a position where the resident thinks that they've been kicked out and the place has been foreclosed on, so they move away or whatever. And so the person responsible for the property is still the owner, even though the bank has, they think, foreclosed completely on the property. So we are seeing a problem with that.
Yeah. In that case, if you leaned the charges, it would go back to the bank, though, wouldn't it?
Right.
Okay.
And then the last point I wanted to make is with the NSP program, we do try to purchase the kind of the real icky ones so we can rehab them and sell them to owner occupied. The ones that no investor will touch, those are the ones that need the most help because we don't want them sitting vacant for years and years and years and years. So the federal government has given us money to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Spreitzer.
I was just wondering with the interior rental inspections, how you distinguish in terms of how it's handled between things that are issues with the building, like in terms of building code versus something that would be a tenant-caused issue, like not sanitary, the hoarding, those, somebody didn't plug too many things into an outlet, those kind of things.
The inspectors usually meet with the residents inside the property or the landlords, and most of the time it's pretty clear. If the roof is leaking, that's a landlord responsibility. If there's clothes and hoarding like you saw in some of the pictures, that's clearly a tenant issue. Extension cords and overloaded circuits, that's a tenant issue. Where it gets sticky is roaches, things like that. So those are still hard to deal with because the tenant and the landlord need to work together to make sure that the problem goes away. And a lot of times they say, well, the tenant brought them in, or the tenant says, oh, well, they were here when I got here, and those get a little bit sticky and difficult. The code does differentiate between what's the tenant's responsibility in that case and what's the landlord's responsibility. So we just try to stick to that and encourage them to work with each other to get it taken care of.
Thank you.
Councilor DeForest, you have something additional to say?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm a little confused because you said the code distinguishes between tenant responsible issues or violations and landlord responsible issue and violations. And what I've heard and what I understand is that there are quite a few what seem to be pretty glaring tenant-related behaviors or issues that there's violations cited for, and the landlord gets stuck with the fine ultimately. So I'm confused by that.
I should have been more clear. The code, it talks about with insect and vermin infestation is where it's clear with the tenant and the landlord.
But in most cases, it's the landlord's responsibility, even for tenant things like parking a car in the grass or, it's been part of the issue I know that we've had that the landlords have brought to us is their frustration that they're receiving fines for things for tenants' behaviors that they can't evict a tenant that day, and yet they're accumulating a fine because of tenant behavior issues. So I'm hoping that we're kind of working through some of those things. I think we are, but I just wanted to make sure because it sounded like, oh, we had everything separated, and I don't think so. Okay.
Yeah, it was just for the infestation. Those kind of things. If we have the tenant's name, we try to, order the tenant. Some landlords are reluctant to give us the tenant names. Otherwise, the property owners are ultimately responsible for their property. Mm-hmm. I know that's not a popular answer, but it's that's just how it is. But they do try to work with the landlords and get the tenant's name so they can order and cite the tenant. Mm-hmm. That way the landlord doesn't have to, deal with that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
I could just follow up with that. I know Ms. Downing for the last year has been trying to actively work with the property owners, and when I meet with them in court, I very specifically tell them if you'd like your tenant held accountable, we need proof of that, because what oftentimes will happen is if we don't have proof of it and landlord says that John Smith lives there, John Smith comes to court and says, no, I didn't live there on that date. So we have to have some very specific information in order to enforce those tickets against the tenant. So I think Ms. Downing and her staff are doing a very good job within the last year of making sure that I have the right documentation for court in order to hold those tenant-type issues to that tenant as opposed to the owner. That's okay. I don't know if I'm on or not. Lease is ideal, but you do have some landlords that either don't enter a written lease with their tenant or have some other kind of arrangement where they're not willing to share that information. And when that happens, our hands are tied. The city needs to have those properties cleaned up, and we do what we can to work with them, but we do have to hold them accountable ultimately.
All right, we'll move on to item 11A. Thank you, Terry. Sorry.
Resolution awarding the sale of approximately $7,860,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2013D.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you recall, at the last meeting, the council authorized the city to issue $7.8 million of general obligation bonds. These bonds will be used to fund the city's 2013 capital improvement projects that have been budgeted for this year in the amount of a little bit over $3 million. And we also have about $4.7 million of refunding bonds associated with this issue. These were the Build America bonds that the city borrowed back in 2009 and 10, and we're looking at a refunding on these basically because of the sequestration of the federal budget. They have cut our interest rebate that we were counting on when we issued that debt back in 09 and 10. And those bonds had a special call provision in there that in the event something like that did occur, it gave us an opportunity to refund that debt. And we do have an opportunity now to do that at a lesser interest rate to where we pretty much are breaking even with what we would normally receive as far as the actual rebates from the federal government on that debt. With the current market rates, it's pretty much a break-even proposition for us right now. So we feel it's advisable to go ahead and exercise that call provision, refund those Build America bonds, knowing that if the federal government has done this within a matter of a couple years after the issuance of that debt, you could probably expect that type of trend to continue into the future, and could even be as much as a totally elimination of the actual interest rebate. So anyway, we did have a bond sale this morning. We did get 3 bids. Our financial advisor, Mike Harrigan with Ellers and Associates, he's here this evening to cover the details of the sale that took place this morning, and we are recommending that we proceed with the issuance of the bonds and the refunding of the Build America bonds, and Mike will cover the details of that transaction. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, councilors. I distributed earlier this evening a folder that contains a document entitled Sale Results. And in that document, I'll just point out that, as was mentioned earlier, you did receive 3 bids today. And the bid that was the best one is listed first, from Robert W. Baird, was the lead underwriter. There were 16 underwriters participating as part of that syndicate. And then we had a bid from Raymond James out of New York and Hutchinson Shockey Early out of Chicago. The true interest rate for this is the number on the far right side. That's the basis of the award, and it is going to be at 2.9754%. We actually had estimated about a 2.88%. We have seen a little bit of a creep up in the levels of interest today as a result of market conditions. I will point out that the successful bidder did bid with a premium. In other words, the price they're offering exceeds the amount of the par amount of the bonds, the $7,860,000. They're offering to pay you $7,911,000, we retain the right under those conditions to reduce the size of the bond issue based on that extra funding so that you can take advantage of that by not issuing more than you need to cover the costs of your projects and to pay for the refunding amount. So if you take a look at page 3, we are recommending the reduction of the size from $7,860,000 to $7,735,000 would be the final amount. And that is the dollar amount that's stipulated in the resolution that was drafted, and it's also in that packet prepared by your bond attorney at Quarles and Brady today. I'll point out that on page 4 we had the issue integrated with your overall debt picture, and you can see that the highlighted yellow is the principal and interest that will be paid each year, and the impact overall on tax rates is indicated on the far right side. From the standpoint of the refunding analysis, I will point out to you that on page 5, actually it's page 5 and page 6, we looked at the refunding of the Build America bonds and these 2 state trust fund loans, which were also funded by the Build America bond program. Keep in mind what you've got there is, again, the federal government has indicated they're going to pay you a certain percentage of the interest cost on those bonds, and the payment that they're making is indicated in the sort of highlighted columns on that sheet. In the case of the recovery zone bonds, it's 45% of the interest, the other 2 are 35%. Based on today's schedule, you come within about $7,000 of that total principal and interest amount. And if we take into account the filing agent fee, which is about $7,300, which is now not going to have to be paid, your cost here is about $224 to stay within exactly where you would have been if you'd have gotten full payment. Well, if you take a look at the next page, we also ran a scenario to say what happens if you continue to get shorted by the 8.7% that you got shorted this year for the life of the bonds. And you can see that you would actually, by proceeding with this issue, have the benefit of a savings of about $67,000 versus what you would get if you were continually reduced by the amount that you got reduced by this year. So in sharing that with Larry Arft and Paul York today, that was the basis for their recommendation to you to proceed, and we agree with that. Notwithstanding that we did have it come in a little higher than what our original estimate was, we do think that it does reflect the market today, and the interest rates that were bid were fairly close to one another. I will point out that you did have a rating affirmation by Standard & Poor's, as you do every time you go through a bond issue. You have to go through a process of being interviewed, and your staff did its usual fine job of representing the city's financial condition. And as a result, the credit report is reflected on pages 8 through 12. And again, as I said, the city was affirmed at its A+ rating with Standard & Poor's. And I'll tell you, I may have mentioned this, I don't know that I mentioned this the last time, but I wanted to just tell you that there's been a lot of pressure on local governments in Wisconsin ratings. In fact, within the past 12 months, we have seen in excess of 15 credits and clients, not just of ours, but across the board, that had a downgrade in their credit rating position, a good deal of which was caused by loss in value combined with erosion of their fund balance. You did not have those. You've been good stewards of your fund balance position, and all other financial indicators, as indicated here, have been maintained at the levels that you need to keep that rating up. So I want to congratulate the council, the manager, and the finance director in being good stewards and maintaining that credit rating. It's very important to you because it helps in these situations when you're seeking to refund and to raise capital for the city. So I'm happy to answer questions, Mr. President. The The action is, of course, to approve the resolution, which was prepared with these numbers in mind, which awards the sale to the low bidder, locks into these rates, and authorizes the refunding of the bonds.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Harrigan? I personally think it's encouraging that this reissue would be roughly the same as if the federal government would do what they said they were going to do. Since they're not going to do what they promised initially, we could at least be masters of our own destiny. So I think that's a positive outcome, even if it is a little less lucrative than we'd hoped.
Motion to accept the bid from R.W. Baird.
Second.
Okay, have a motion from Lubke and second by Levy.
So that would be the motion for the resolution, and
Right.
you'll need a formal roll call, Mr. President.
All right, we'll be doing this on a roll call vote, so.
Counselor DeForest? Counselor Kincaid? Counselor Spritzer?
Aye.
Counselor Haynes?
Aye.
Counselor Levy?
Aye.
Counselor Lukey?
Aye.
Roll call vote passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item 11B.
Resolution amending the 2013 operating budget for staffing for adequate fire and emergency response, SAFER Grant Program Award.
Chief?
Good evening, councilors. This is a resolution authorizing the Special Revenue Fund and expenditures for the SAFER Grant. In 2012, we approved a resolution allowing us to apply for the grant. We received a notification in April that we would receive the grant. The performance period is from July 3rd, 2013 to July 2nd, 2015. There's no requirement to retain the positions at the end of the grant, and this will increase our staffing and improve our response capacity for that 2-year period. So I'd ask for your support of this resolution.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
We're moved by DeForest, second by Levy. Do we have any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 6-0.
Thank you very much.
You have a good day, Chief. All right, item 11C.
Resolution authorizing the transfer of funds and amending the 2013 operating budget for the cost of living and merit salary increases and the cost to implement the new non-represented pay and classification plan.
Mr. York.
Yes, Mr. President. When we prepared the operating budget for this year, it was prior to the completion of the pay and classification study that was completed earlier this spring. And we had set aside sufficient funds in the budget in all the city's operating accounts to implement not only the pay plan, but also to provide cost of living and merit increases for city staff, the non-represented staff. And basically what this resolution is doing is authorizing the reallocation of those funds that we had set aside in the budget to the various departmental operating accounts. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. I would like to point out that the actual cost of the raises and the pay plan implementation is less than what we had set aside in the budget. So there's no additional funds necessary in order to provide these pay adjustments and the pay plan implementation.
Thank you. Do you have a motion to approve?
Approval.
Moved by Levy, second by Lubke. Councilor Spreitzer.
Given that we came in a little bit under what we'd anticipated, do those remaining funds just roll back into the fund balance of whichever fund they were designated from?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other councilor questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the matter. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 6-0. Moving forward to 11D.
Resolution approving a cooperative agreement with the City of Janesville for commercial and electrical building inspector services.
Mrs. Christensen.
You may recall that back in 11, we approved a cooperative agreement with Janesville for us to provide commercial plumbing inspection services to them, because at that time they had a retirement. Now we went to Janesville and made a similar ask. We have a staff person who will be out of the office from anywhere from a few weeks to, who knows. And this person does the commercial building and the electrical inspections. And similar to the commercial plumbing inspections, those require a little bit higher level of certification. And so we do not have it, we only have it in one position. So what this agreement would do was similar to the last agreement. It would provide for, I believe it's payment at $50 per hour plus the current IRS mileage rate, which says in accordance with City of Janesville policy, but it would basically be, we'd be paying a rate for the actual miles drove by the inspector plus $50 per hour, just for the hours that we would need this person to be there for inspection services during the time that the staff person is out of the office. And it is just for the commercial and electrical building inspection services.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Levy, second by DeForest. Councilor Lubke.
I just wanted to thank you, Julie, for the cooperation between the two cities and facilitating this. Thank you.
And Councilor DeForest.
I'm excited about the collaborative agreement as well. And I just wanted to double check a quick question. I'm assuming we don't have a high demand currently for these inspections. Do we anticipate there'll be significant delays for our residents here when we have to rely on Janesville to provide those for us?
This is commercial building and electrical, so there is actually a high demand right now
Okay.
because we're doing all the school projects plus the
Oh,
Phoenix
that's
project.
right.
And we just received Piggly Wiggly's building plan. So there is a demand for this. We will also be utilizing some of our building inspectors to kind of do a check-in and still go by these sites to check in.
Okay.
They just can't do the required inspections.
Okay.
We're hoping that the staff person is only out a couple weeks and this won't be a big deal. By the way, Janesville City Council won't be taking action on this till the 28th.
Okay.
So we won't have this in place till closer to the beginning of June. But we have a lot of building projects actually going on.
Okay.
And all of those require that kind of service. So I
Do
think
we-
we will be using it somewhat.
Right. Do we anticipate significant delays at
No.
all since we'll be sharing a person? No. Okay.
We do not anticipate that.
Thank you.
Councilor Kincaid.
Will the commercial inspections include multifamily?
If there was multifamily construction.
Yeah, well, such as Phoenix.
Well, yeah, the Phoenix project is one of the projects that requires those inspection services. Yeah, it's anything from, that's not 1 and 2 units. 1 and 2 units are covered under the Uniform Dwelling Code, and we have actually 3 people, actually 4, who are certified in that. So the single family and 2 family would always be covered. The commercial requires a little bit higher level, and the commercial electric, similar to the commercial plumbing that Janesville had a need for, is a more specialized type of inspection service, and so you don't usually have, in city of our size, everybody certified in that. We'll make sure, we've been communicating to the contractors now that there'll be a different process, and we will work very hard to make sure there's no delays. And we are going to utilize the other 2 building inspectors to kind of just do a check-in and kind of keep in touch with the contractors on the projects they're doing, which is what we've typically done on the commercial side.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the matter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 6-0. And we'll move on to 11E.
Resolution supporting the proposed infrastructure improvements in the City of Beloit related to the Ho-Chunk Nation's planned economic development project.
Staff is recommending the City Council approve a resolution supporting the Ho-Chunk Nation's grant application for the Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery Grant. The grant is related to the Ho-Chunk Nation's planned economic development project that includes a casino, hotel, conference center, and a retail center. The proposed development is estimated to generate 1,500 jobs, and additional jobs are anticipated to result from other related developments in the area. The grant's highly competitive and has only about a 5% award rate for those applications. The Ho-Chunk Nation's engaged a highly knowledgeable and experienced consultant to work on this. We're optimistic, but it's certainly a very competitive process. The grant involved is, of course, a transportation grant to assist economic recovery and job development. The particular transportation projects involved are the lane addition for Willowbrook Road, the reconstruction and possible realignment of Collie Road, the enhancement along Milwaukee Road, and upgrades to various intersections along these roadways, in addition to other potential transportation improvements that will be developed or identified during the course of the overall application submittal. We're currently looking primarily at potential transit improvements, possibly to the transit facility or transit bus equipment.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Levy, second by Lubke. Councilor DeForest.
Thank you. Just for clarification, for the public, we're offering a letter of support to the Ho-Chunk Nation for this grant application, and in no way obligates us at this point. We have to accept the award on terms that we're comfortable with. Is that correct?
That's right. There's no financial commitment through this action tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the matter. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 6-0.
Thank you.
And item 12.
So moved.
Moved by Levy and second by DeForest. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.